carbon footprint of any leather maker in the world through minimizing their waste. So it's really great to see some of the stories that are already here today, and part of my job is learning about and telling those stories to others. So as you said, I was appointed by the Prime Minister as the UK's net zero business champion last year, specifically to champion the efforts and cajole them to make the pledges in the run-up to COP. And we're asking world leaders to work together to deliver the urgent climate action that we need. And as we know, it's one thing for the world leaders to do that, but at the end of the day, it's business and enterprise that will actually be delivering it. So we're inviting every business, I'm inviting every business across the UK to join this revolution and to be more sustainable. It's good business and it's good for our planet. The way we're doing that is something called the Race to Zero, which is a global UN effort supported by the United Kingdom to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases to net zero by 2050. And that sends a really strong signal to markets, supply chains, to governments, consumers, that businesses themselves are playing a really big part in that transition. So as well as celebrating and showcasing what you yourself are doing, we also want you to lead the way with your supply chain. It's a really important way that we can cascade this down, and to share your expertise with peers and encourage them too to make those ambitious steps. Every single one of us have a key role to play, and if we all move together, the costs and the speed of making the change is so much easier and so much faster to do. So if we all move together, we're all each other's keepers on climate. What does that actually mean in practice? How do you join? It means setting your business that target yourself, being net zero by 2050, long way away at the latest. At the same time, putting in place shorter term plans that are verified or verifiable, and then targeting that around the 1.5 degrees science-based targets. So as I said before, the Race to Zero is accredited by the UN, it's accredited by the UK government, and it's a very simple kite mark. We all understand in businesses the power of kite marks. This is a simple, unimpeachable kite mark that everybody can have confidence in. So that's for the larger businesses, but we've made sure that businesses of all sizes can get involved through the Together for Our Planet small business campaign. And that's something that I'm spending a lot of time doing, and I'm particularly passionate about, because small businesses, we have so many in the United Kingdom, and they really are a key part of the economy, employing so many people. So you can go to businessclimatehub.org.uk and you will find everything you need, including some very simple practical resources about the steps that you are taking. And then please tell everybody, especially me, what you're doing so I can champion it and celebrate those positive steps, like the fact we're meeting today and talking about this. So just to conclude my opening remarks, I think we've got a huge task ahead of us as business, and we shouldn't be intimidated by that. But we also have a huge opportunity to build sustainable businesses, to grow our businesses, and to create businesses in new sectors of the economy that will eventually be world leading and create huge export markets for this country. So I'm hugely excited. Thank you very much for having me with you today, and I look forward to staying and sharing on this panel conversation.
Great. I know you have to go at 10:30, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before I bring the other panelists in. I'm delighted also that all the companies mentioned are members of the Chamber of Commerce. That was really very, very nicely done. First of all, though, maybe your comment about small businesses, because specifically in Glasgow, a lot of small businesses want to have some involvement in COP26. There's a real enthusiasm to be involved. Can you say anything from your perspective about how the UK government might be keen to help the local host city businesses to engage with COP26 as part of Race to Zero?
Well, I hope there's lots of ways, and I recognise, for small businesses, your biggest opportunity cost is generally time. So the more that we can make getting involved in these journeys as simple as possible, the better. And there are a lot of resources. I'm sure the Chamber has got some. I know the Royal Bank of Scotland has got some. So there's a lot of help out there once you start on this journey. I hope there's a good opportunity for small businesses to be involved, both with the City Council, but also with the COP organizers as potential suppliers. That's definitely one of the things that I think the frameworks have been set up to do. And those will be conversations that will be happening probably in real time right now. So please put up your hand. Maybe the Chamber of Commerce is a good way in to see if there's any goods or services that you can supply. And make the most of the economic opportunity of hosting the world in Glasgow. My campaign, the Small Business Climate Hub, is absolutely about small businesses and making sure that you don't feel left out, that you can make the same pledge in the same structure as the big guys. And then you can talk about that, put a badge on your website, maybe put a sticker in your shop window so that people see that you are every part of this initiative. I don't want this to be personally about elites. I want this to be about everybody all moving together. And third and finally, organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, whereas it may be difficult because this is a global summit, it's a bit the UN on tour, it's probably quite difficult for any of us just to get a badge and wander into the exhibition centre. Organizations like the Chamber of Commerce will be doing that as federations. And so if you're part of a broader group, whatever it is, it could be UK hospitality, it could be the Chambers of Commerce's, then there may well be opportunities to get involved that way.
Thanks very much. I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then turn to the panel. Doug Morwood of Insight Futures asks, do you think that enough businesses and business leaders have the climate change as a necessary and practical focus?
No, but I do want to celebrate that I really do think businesses are engaged in this sustainability agenda. And there is always more that we can do. And to be frank, I mean, I started in November. I mean, my background is in business. It's not in sustainability per se, although the business I worked for was quite focused on that area. And even in that period, so when I started in November, just to give some numbers, fewer than 10% of the biggest, like the FTSE 100 companies, I only use that because it's easier to track the data, had got involved in making these pledges. Today, that's well over a third. And so we are seeing, even in that short space of time, awareness really, really increase. And I think it's going to reach its apex in Glasgow in November, by which point I would hope every business, even if they haven't quite made it to the threshold of being able to pledge to net zero, is doing something. And I'm a strong exponent of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. So there is something that everybody can do, however simple, and start the journey is the best way.
Great stuff. Anthony Burns at ACS Clothing, he asks, the fashion industry, second biggest polluter globally after oil, and yet perhaps overlooked. How can we focus more on this area? And he's asking, can we actually incentivize consumers to make the right choice, i.e. perhaps removal of VAT from sustainable fashion in the UK? Is that the kind of thing that you're able to feed back into the UK government as a whole in your role?
Yeah, I have what I call a pretty thin policy role, because there's one of me and there's a lot of government and there's a lot of policy. So I do make suggestions where there are actionable ideas, whether that's to the Treasury, or I work with Bay's colleagues to see what can be done from a policy perspective to nudge or support that are trying to do the right thing. And the example of ACS, who I know have done a lot of thought leadership in this space, could be a really good example. I think consumers, by and large, they understand this journey. A lot of businesses that have made the most progress are those that deal with consumers every day. And there's a green pound opportunity as well, in that increasingly people are seeking out those businesses that have committed to net zero. It can also make good business. I mean, I was speaking to another fast fashion producer the other day, and they were talking about the amount of water that they used to use, and now they've found processes to reduce that by 90%. That was one of their biggest costs, and they've now reduced that cost at the same time as being more sustainable. So it's good business all round.
Splendid, thanks very much. Now, as I say, I know you need to leave at 10:30, but I'm now going to bring in our fellow panelists. First up, Guy Jefferson, who's the Chief Operating Officer of SP Energy Network. Guy's worked within the SP Group, Scottish Power Group, for over 28 years, and he's gained a wealth of experience in a number of different roles for SP Energy Networks. Crucially, though, Guy serves on both the Glasgow Economic Leadership Board and the Board of Sustainable Glasgow, acting as the chair of the Green Economy Hub that Susan mentioned earlier. So the city's economy will respond to the net zero challenge. I'll be coming back to him shortly. We're also joined by Barry Fisher, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Keep Scotland Beautiful, where he's been in post since 2020. He joined from the Duke of Edinburgh's award, where he lastly held the role of Scotland Director, and then previous to that, he was with the Ocean Youth Trust Scotland. Next up is Jo Chidley. Welcome, Jo. She's the founder of Beauty Kitchen UK Limited, a company on a mission to create the most sustainable beauty product in the world. Widely regarded as one of the pioneers of sustainable beauty, Jo is driving the beauty industry forward with better practice approaches, and she's won many awards in the industry. She's also a business ambassador for Circular Glasgow. Finally, we're joined by Dr. Warren Bowden, who is the Managing Director of Scottish Leather Technology. He's a Fellow of the Society of Leather Chemists, an inventor of the pioneering and patented thermal energy plant. Dr. Bowden has spent the past 18 years of his 25-year career within the sector, leading the multi-award winning sustainability agenda through circularising leather net zero. So, and Warren is ambassador. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to kick it off first, though, by asking Guy. You're obviously, with your company, right in the middle of the climate change challenge. Can you say a little bit about what COP26 means for your organisation, and maybe also a bit about the role you're playing with the Glasgow Green Economy Hub?
Yeah, sure. And good morning, everyone, and thanks for inviting me along today. In terms of COP26, I think a lot's been said already, and Susan said it very eloquently in terms of the opportunity for Glasgow. I think it puts us in the spotlight, and the businesses within Glasgow in the spotlight, and it's a great opportunity for us not only to show what we have been doing, which from my experience working with Sustainable Glasgow over the last year or so is extensive, but it also allows us, I think, to accelerate a lot of the discussions that probably would have happened anyway, given the targets that have been set for 2030. But having that milestone, if you like, at the end of this year has really accelerated what I would have expected to happen in the city over the last few months. We are now involved in best practice sharing and talking together with a number of businesses about what we're doing to reduce our emissions and drive towards that net zero carbon target that the city has. So I think that's fantastic. I think if I think about it a little wider as well, in terms of Scotland and UK, I think it's allowed us to, or is allowing us to talk to government about what we really need to do now in order to facilitate that target. So for my own company, which is part of the Scottish Power Group, proud to be a principal partner, obviously, of COP26. But for the networks part of the business, which is regulated, we've been talking with the regulator extensively about green recovery and making sure we invest now for the future. And delighted to say that those discussions have moved on apace over the last couple of months. And we are bidding in for projects and hope to hear next week that we've been successful on projects that will facilitate green recovery and the decarbonisation targets we have ahead of us. I don't think that would have happened, certainly not as quickly, without COP26 coming to Glasgow. And some of those projects are in Glasgow, which is fantastic. And that allows us, again, to demonstrate in November what we're doing to try and achieve as a city the net zero targets that we're trying to facilitate. So a lot in there, but it's a fantastic opportunity, and the engagement I've had with the business community has been absolutely superb through Sustainable Glasgow. I'm sure we'll talk about the charter later on, Stuart, but I'll give someone else a chance just now. Back to you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Gary. We will. Barry, I'll turn to you next. Scotland Beautiful has been educate and provide climate emergency. A commitment is being made on that. Do you want to tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and also thanks for the opportunity to join you and for pulling us all together in what has been, I think, a very positive and really setting a real sense of ambition ahead of COP, which is really exciting to see. I was just reflecting, there's a book on my shelf behind me, which I'm sure many people will have, which is How Scots Invented the Modern World. And I can't help thinking that with a lot of the energy that's around at the moment, perhaps we're writing the chapter as we speak. There's so much to be done, but it's with the culture of innovation, not just in the city, but indeed in the country. I'd like to think we'd look back in this period and be very much aware of the contribution we've made, not just in a country sense, but actually indeed globally. But I think in terms of COP, Keep Scotland Beautiful has been very much focused on building capacity, working very hard around delivering climate emergency training, both in school actually, making sure that young people, and I think we heard a little bit of that from Susan Aiken this morning, making sure young people not just build on their awareness, but actually see the opportunity in terms of their careers moving forward into the world of work. But for us, we've been delivering climate emergency training right across the private sector and been absolutely thrilled to be able to do that. And in fact, this morning, delighted to announce that we've been working with McDonald's, who've been our partners for us for well over 10 years now on another strand of our activity. But we're working with them to deliver training to 20 of their managers in Scotland. And I'm delighted to say, with your support as well through the Chamber, Stuart, that they've extended that offer to 20 other small to medium enterprises. So I'm sure we'll be able to put that out through the Chamber. But a great example of partnership of where McDonald's working with us and yourselves to perhaps lever more climate emergency training to the SME sector. So absolutely thrilled to announce that today.
That's great. Thank you very much, Barry. Turning to Joe, built a company that's got sustainability right at the heart of your strategy. So what does COP26 coming to Glasgow mean to you? What are you hoping for?
So thank you very much for inviting me today. Being here as a representative of the personal care and beauty industry, which is a huge industry, not just here in the UK, but globally, what we want to demonstrate is how it is possible for an industry to actually make those changes, but bridge the gap between industry and consumers. So at Beauty Kitchen, we run with cradle to cradle principles, which means we design products that are circular. And what that means is that the resources that we use continue to be reused again and again and again. And as a small indie brand within the beauty industry, what we then do is drive that change with much bigger organisations. So we have Unilever, as an example, who are using our reusable packaging system because we've developed that to reduce the barriers to entry, to prove that it's scalable, it's commercially viable, and it's profitable. And that de-risks the nervousness for larger organisations. And that's where I think SMEs have an advantage over much bigger organisations because we're nimble, we can fail quicker, we can fail cheaper, and we can actually be more risky with smaller returns on investment. So for Beauty Kitchen, we want to be able to drive the change. And with COP26 being here in Glasgow, in our local city, that gives us an opportunity to showcase what SMEs can do and how we can demonstrate that we are the innovators when it comes to making those significant actionable changes that will reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. And it's not just through our consumer products, it's also through our supply chain. So net zero is just as important to small businesses, if not more important, than it is to much larger businesses, because there is many more of us. And with small businesses, you have employees. So you're then touching net zero in COP26 towards the consumer base, to bring to life what Glasgow can possibly achieve later in the year. And that focus really helps. So what we always do here at Beauty Kitchen is engage with people, try and bring them along and make things that seem very risky or seem that they would cost a lot more, that actually it's not that risky and it doesn't cost that much. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Fantastic, thanks, Joe. And Warren, I'm bringing Warren again. Scottish Leather Group, hugely important company to Glasgow. What does COP26 mean to you and the net zero ambitions that you've set for your company?
Stuart, thank you. Firstly, can I say privileged to be here as a Circular Glasgow ambassador, also as a freeman of the city of Glasgow, and this being the host city for COP26. Those two things really clash for me absolutely fantastically. Also delighted I haven't got to share my screen, which is, I think, given the episodes of the last year, a delight not to have to do so. For me, both for Glasgow and I think also for COP26, the key piece that needs to be on the agenda, and I think it is circularity. Susan earlier mentioned the lighthouse. I took my kids up there a couple of years ago, stood on top and saw verdant green fields, some with snow caps on the top. And if you look carefully, you see the odd livestock walking around. You also see fuel, wind power, the sea. Did anyone know that Scottish agriculture is already net zero? Do we talk enough about what we have immediately and locally to us? Scottish Leather Group obviously take one of the byproducts of that sector, circularized manufacturing. That's a big part of what we do, and it's not something that's recent. This is the 18th year that we've been presenting our sustainability report transparently to the world. We do make the lowest carbon leather on the planet, and thank you to the shout out from the MP earlier. That was lovely to hear. But it's not just about making the product; it's about what happens to it after it's gone through its principal use. And without horrendous plugs, anybody who wants to go onto the Mulberry website and have a look at Made to Last campaign. That is an example of circularity in action. At the end of life of that leather good, we can take it back, circularize the whole manufacturing process, including the use phase of the product. I think that's a sort of epiphany that we can exemplify here, not just in Scottish Leather Group, but that principle can be applied elsewhere. Delighted with the question earlier, and I wasn't going to mention this, but I am given the question with regard to fashion industry. If anyone hasn't seen the film True Cost, Google it, you can find it. It's a 2-minute trailer. It will shock you. Perhaps globalization hasn't worked. And I think this issue of local is particularly important. Obviously, it's relevant to Glasgow as host city, but it's also relevant in terms of growing the local economy and I think building back better. We have to think twice, I think, sometimes when we go and buy goods from all over the planet and actually wonder what the true cost is of those goods. And you have to ask yourself the question, is chasing the cheap needle really the right thing? I don't think so. And I think it's something that we can look to build on, I think, more locally. And I think Glasgow has the opportunity to do that. Just one more thing, if I might. For me, COP26 is a stepping stone. I've always wondered about this phrase of chasing net zero, which for many is still an ambitious target. But as we move towards 2045, science-based targets, is it not more appropriate that we perhaps look beyond zero? Let's go beyond nothing. Is there an opportunity to look at carbon positive as an epiphany, as an exemplar city on the planet? Thanks, Joe.
Fantastic, thanks, Warren. I'm gonna turn it back to Guy and Andrew in a second before he has to go. Guy, you were asking me if I might come back to the charter, and this is the opportunity. Do you want to say a little bit about what you've been doing on building up a Glasgow Business Charter?
Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. I think it ties back to that the kind of race to zero challenge that we were talking about earlier on. It's very similar, but it's more local. I think some organisations get a little bit nervous about signing up to a big global charter. So I think it's great. Some people say there's so many of these things around. Which one do I sign up to? Which one's the best? Which one suits me? But I think my view is that if we have something that's a bit more local, a bit more Glasgow, that will allow us to share best practices and work together more closely with regard to driving towards those targets that we've been talking about this morning. So under the auspices of Sustainable Glasgow, which Susan chairs, I chair the Green Economy Hub, which involves various businesses and organisations across the city. And we developed a charter which has the kind of pledges on it that you might expect in terms of operations. It's about sharing, what you're doing and sharing a commitment to drive towards that net zero target. It's about showing that you're taking demonstrable actions and you're making those visible and publishing online how you're proceeding against those challenges, but also about the influence and leadership that you can have as an organisation. Share your best practice, communicate what you're doing, and try and help other organisations in the city deliver against the target where some might be struggling. And there are other things in there like commitments around transport and making sure that you are driving towards a sustainable travel hierarchy, and also buildings, facilities. So we've got things in there about food waste, we've got things in there about organisational estate and making sure we're making our buildings as efficient and sustainable as possible. So we've asked a number of the business community to sign up to this commitment, and I'm absolutely delighted that we've got now 20 organisations on board. We're looking to launch hopefully end of this month, start of next, and Susan has agreed to be involved in that in terms of signing off for Glasgow City Council. But it's an open invitation to organisations in Glasgow who have the ambition that we all need to sign up to that and work more locally, I guess, with organisations here in Glasgow in terms of sharing best practice and encouraging each other. Just to lastly mention about the SME angle, and Jo showed her passion there earlier on for what she's doing, and that's absolutely fantastic. And we want to try and have SMEs involved in this as much as possible as well. So we've, and some that we've talked to don't necessarily have the knowledge or the resources to perhaps do as much as they'd like about to build their own sustainability strategy. So we've created an avenue for them to sign up to our charter, but also give them advice and signpost them to the facilities and the resources that are out there, even locally here in Scotland, through our colleagues in Business Gateway, but also obviously work with other SMEs who are perhaps more advanced in this journey, as Joe's talked about earlier on. So we're trying to get everybody involved in this as much as possible and make it very visible what businesses are doing already in Glasgow, which again, remarks before, there's some fantastic stuff going on that doesn't get the light of day that it should, but also encourage others to come on board and share in the challenge we've got as a city.
Thank you very much, Guy. Andrew, just do you like the kind of initiative yourself? Did you catch that, Andrew? I was just asking. I seem to be getting a little bit of feedback. Yeah, I'm just asking, Andrew, is this the kind of initiative that Guy has just outlined? Is that the kind of initiative that you would support as Net Zero champion?
Few things. One is we have this moment in time opportunity that is not just the COP event itself. That'll be the crescendo, but we've got 6 months to COP now, and that's a brilliant window in which lots of activity can take place. Secondly, I agree with you can never communicate this too much, and business has a really privileged role. We wouldn't be in business, wouldn't be good in business if we weren't great at communicating with customers and our supply chain. So I would challenge every business that every piece of communication, whether it's a sales conference, meeting with your suppliers, talking to your customers, has a clear net zero aspect to it between now and COP. Let's really use that as a big opportunity. And then finally, Sustainability Glasgow sounds great. And I would try and do both of those things. There's a national kite mark, the Together for Our Planet Business Climate campaign. That has the benefit of simplicity, of recognition, and there's a real place-based aspect and a really motivating place-based aspect of everything that's being done on sustainability and net zero. So I absolutely celebrate, local areas taking the initiative, local groups such like the Chamber getting us together today to really step into that.
Thanks, Andrew, and I'm conscious that you now have to leave. So thank you very much for your contribution this morning. We very much look forward to seeing you in Glasgow in person when the time is right in the lead up to COP26.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I look forward to that. And thank you very much. I'm sorry I haven't had longer to hear even more of the contributions of this excellent panel. But thank everybody for what they're doing. And let's everybody just resolve the one takeaway today is to do something, not nothing.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Joe, I'm going to turn to you again and say what you've gone through the whole experience because it's core to your business. There's a lot of SMEs out there that are confused, one might say. They're a wee bit unsure. What does net zero mean? There seem to be a lot of dates floating around as to what you should commit to. We've had a wee bit of discussion about carbon neutrality. How do they pick their way through that, Joe?
Yeah, so I think the first starting point is to take a deep breath. Yeah, there is a lot of communication out there. And I think as an SME, someone mentioned earlier that time is really a priority for you, and you have to understand, where does this fit into your priorities? The second thing is that there is lots of organisations that are offering to help. But the one that we use that I would highly recommend is the energy efficiency through Zero Waste Scotland. And the reason for that is, as an SME, I make decisions quite quickly. And because there's really just me and our 16 employees, we can move on those decisions quite quickly. So with Zero Waste Scotland and being action orientated, what they do is they actually run a report that gives you as a company and an SME, and this service is free, I might add, to give you details of how you can be more energy efficient. And by being more energy efficient means that you are closer to net zero. So rather than necessarily worrying about the big blue sky idea, I would turn your attention to what is actionable now. Because what will happen through that process is that you will gain knowledge and more understanding, and then net zero will be, in my head, easier to understand. The other thing I would always say is ask for help with organisations like myself, like Warren's, who have been in the circular economy since the beginning, because we are sustainability nerds. We love to talk about it. And the thing about being within the sustainability industry is you love to share, you love to collaborate, because this is not about sustainable, this is not about competitive advantage. It's about everyone saving the planet.
Great stuff. Actually, I take a couple of very important messages out of that, which is don't try and be perfect at this. Just leap in, get started. And there's a lot of free advice out there to draw on. So reach out. There'll be people there to help. If I can bring Barry in again. Barry, in terms of your experience looking around at organisations struggling with what appears to be an incredibly complex and competitive almost environment, what sort of advice would you be giving to someone who can't quite get their mind around net zero, carbon neutrality, and all the other kind of terminology that's involved?
Yeah, no, there was a quote actually when Joe was speaking there that went through my brain, which I think Mark Twain said, "The secret of getting ahead is getting started." And I think that's the most important thing, isn't it? Is that we get involved in this. However small it may feel, but actually it's that first step that really, really matters. I think our experience through the work we've been doing around climate emergency training, actually, if I can bring in actually an example from the City Council, we've been delighted to work closely with the City Council. We've delivered that climate emergency training both to the councillors and to the senior officers. And I think there's a message there, not just of leadership, but actually alignment right through an organisation, in terms of where leaders, clearly have an idea that the future here is around sustainability. Clearly, the people within your organisation need to understand why you're going in particular directions. And I think that's where we find, and what we receive back from the diverse range of clients that we have around climate emergency training, is that where it makes a real difference. And I'm just sorry that Andrew Griffiths has left, because we actually did some climate emergency training with in Stockholm with the foreign office out there. So it's amazing the diversity of organisations and places where this is becoming much more important to them. So I think it is true to say that it potentially can be quite confusing in terms of the number of, as you say, kite marks and different pieces out there. But equally, I think that diversity of a marketplace is sometimes quite helpful, because I think it helps organisations at different scales to come into something that suits them best. So we've done some work, notably within the hospitality sector, which, as we know, has had an extraordinarily difficult year, and no doubt will continue to have for the foreseeable future. But that sense that Visit Scotland is very much driving a world-class destination, which of course includes our great cities. But at the heart of that should be responsible tourism, and we've developed a program called Green Key, which helps the hospitality sector project their journey to sustainability through that Green Key program, which is very much tailored to that sector. So I don't think a plurality in that sector, if you're around accreditation, is necessarily a bad thing. But I think they can coexist, and I think Guy probably outlined that really, really well in terms of that difference between local, national, and indeed international with the programme we've got around Green Key. So a lot of information, a lot to digest, but fundamentally, I think, as Joe's touched on, it's quite exciting to get started.
Fantastic, thanks, Barry. I've got a question, Martin, again. Could the panel suggest one action that an SME could take to reduce their carbon footprint? I'm just going to ask a couple from the panel, and actually I'll ask Warren, because you've done it. What would you say to an SME, to Janet's question, an action an SME could take to reduce their carbon footprint?
Sure. If I can combine a couple of answers, I think the first thing in any kind of management practice is obviously to measure it. 18 years ago, we did a benchmark exercise. And this was before the language of net zero started and before people started talking about greenhouse gas 1 and 2 emissions. Do you actually know your own footprint? And there's some very easy ways to do that. First and easy one, just as a plug, Circular Glasgow team, they're fantastic. Get in touch with them. There are some smaller scale organisations too. Scottish Net Zero Community is another one. There are a number of apps you can buy. They're a few £100, and all it means is putting in your energy bills into an app, and it tells you what your footprint is. So you don't